How to repair your air hydraulic floor-based pit jack. If you need to repair your floor-based pit jack, start by removing the air supply and then separate the hydraulic unit from the trolley. Before you start any repair work, make sure that the hydraulic unit is stable and secured against tilting. Start by draining the jack for oil. Remove the right oil plug on the cylinder base, under the release valve. Make sure to refit the plug afterwards. Remove the operating handle. And the valve knob and the bushing on top. Then remove the two screws under the cylinder base. And finally, the complete release valve. It's a good idea to plug both oil ports to prevent oil spill. If possible, secure the stability of the assembly. Here we are using a locking pin in the hole for the release valve. This will fixate the jack and keep everything aligned for reassembly. Start by loosening the big packing box. Please note that all special tools used in this video are available on request. Use a fibre hammer to keep the big flange joint into the reservoir tube. When this cylinder assembly is loose, you will need a crane to lift it out of the cylinder tube. Fix an eye bolt to the piston rod and use a bent piece of heavy wire to secure the assembly when lifting. Carefully lift the assembly. And fix it in a vise with aluminium jaws in order not to damage the surfaces. Pull the piston rod to full length. Heat the piston guide in order to break the sealing. Unscrew the piston guide. Push back the piston rod and repeat the procedure on the small packing box. Remove the eye bolt before you loosen and remove the small packing box. Pull the piston rod with piston from the middle cylinder. Be careful with the cylinder parts. Remove the large packing box. Clean all parts before you proceed. If you need to change the cylinder seals, start by removing the old scraper ring in the small packing box. Make sure the part is clean and dry before you refit a new scraper ring. Here we use a special tool, but a piece of tube will do as well. Use plenty of grease. Make sure that the ring is positioned correctly and without damage. Apply plenty of grease. Remove the scraper ring and the seals inside the large packing box. Clean the parts. Grease and refit a new scraper ring. Again, make sure that the ring is positioned correctly and without damage. Refit new seals. Note that the yellow backup ring is bold shape to fit the O-ring. Make sure to position it correctly when you refit it. Clean the parts and check for scratches and rust. Remove the seals on the outside of the large packing box. Clean the parts and check for scratches and rust before you refit new seals. Note again that the yellow backup ring is bold shape to fit the O-ring. Make sure that the top of the packing box is without scratches or rust, and clean the part before you replace the last big O-ring. Use plenty of grease on all seals. Next step is to change the seals on the piston rod with the small piston. Be careful not to damage the cylinder. Remove the seals on the small piston. Clean the parts with a detergent. And check for scratches and rust and replace cylinder parts if needed. Apply plenty of grease before you refit new seals and use plenty of grease on the seals as well. When you are ready to reassemble the cylinder unit, start by applying plenty of grease to the middle cylinder before refitting the large packing box. Push it in place and make sure that the inside thread is dry and clean. Apply Loctite on the small packing box and refit it on the middle cylinder. Here we use an inserter to squeeze the piston seals and ease mounting into the middle cylinder. Fit a 16mm threaded bolt on the piston rod to help you get a better grip. Apply plenty of grease and then carefully push the piston rod into the middle cylinder. Always be careful not to damage the piston seals, especially if you don't have an inserter. Clean the cylinder tube and the piston guide. Apply a bit of Loctite to piston guide before refitting on the cylinder. Exchange the threaded bolt with the eye bolt and make sure the cylinder parts can move unobstructed. Finally, secure the assembly for lifting with the bent piece of heavy wire through the eye and under the flange joint. If you need to change the seals on the flanges, start by removing the top flange on the oil reservoir. Then remove the air hose by pushing the small red ring while pulling the hose. Remove the locking bolt. And then remove the oil reservoir. Replace the O-ring on the cylinder base with a new one. Turn over the oil reservoir and use plenty of grease on the bottom. Before carefully refitting it on the cylinder base. Remember to fit the locking bolt in order to stabilise and keep the parts aligned. Remove the seals on the bottom. Clean the flange with a detergent and check for scratches and rust. Refit new seals on the bottom of the flange. Note that the yellow backup ring is bold shaped to fit the O-ring. Make sure to position it correctly. Remove the external O-ring and clean the part. Refit a new O-ring. Apply plenty of grease on all seals. When you are ready to reassemble the hydraulic unit, start by placing the flange joint on the oil reservoir. Refit it using a fibre hammer. Clean the parts and make sure the flange joint is positioned correctly. Use plenty of grease on the flange. Refit the cylinder unit. Take care not to damage the cylinder parts. Use plenty of grease on the packing box before you lower the cylinder unit completely. Remove the wire and the eye bolt. Tighten the big packing box to a torque setting of 300 Nm. Finally, clean the unit. Refill oil through the oil plug in the reservoir tube. With the rams fully down, correct oil level is to the lower edge of the hole. Following repair, the hydraulic system needs to be bled. Start by connecting the air supply. Start by pumping the first cylinder stage some 100 mm up against a small load of minimum 500 kg. Here we use a test bench, but a workshop press or a forklift will do as well. In order to avoid oil spill, it might be a good idea to connect a homemade bleeding hose to the bleeding hole on top of the cylinder. Start by removing the small M6 Allen screw and then carefully the inside 4.5 mm ball. Then connect fitting and hose to the M6 thread. You need to bleed the foot pump first. Loosen the two screws on the dismount axle momentarily to gain access to the pump piston. Loosen the Allen screw on top of the pump piston and another Allen screw on the front of the pump. Then at first activate the quick lift with the right air valve. Secondly, pump the pedal until pure oil, without air bubbles, emerges from the two screws. Then retighten the two Allen screws. Activate the air hydraulic pump with the left air valve in order to bleed the cylinder. And notice how oil with air from the cylinder is running in the hose. When there is no more air in the oil, lower the cylinder and finally remove hose and fitting and remount ball and screw. Finally, verify that the cylinder runs nice and smoothly without any jumping. If you need to change the complete air hydraulic pump or fix the air motor, start by removing the air hose on the reservoir. Plug the fitting. Place the hydraulic unit on its side with the air pump facing up. Next step is to remove the air hose on the air motor by pushing the small red ring while pulling the hose. Remove the two screws under the cylinder base and remove the complete pump. If you are changing the complete pump, simply skip to the instructions for refitting the pump. If you need to repair the air motor, start by fixing the pump block in a vise and then remove the sound absorber. Mark the exact position of the air motor before you remove it. You will need it for refitting. Remove the air motor. Remove the packing box. Remove the seal in the pump block, and also remove the seals in the packing box. Clean the parts with a detergent and check for scratches and marks. Refit new seals in the packing box. Make sure they are positioned correctly before you refit them. Use plenty of grease. Apply grease and refit the seal on the pump block and remount the packing box. Remove the piston from the air cylinder and clean it. Check for scratches and marks. Make sure that the seals on the air piston are intact. Use plenty of grease on the air cylinder and refit the piston and spring. Refit the air motor on the pump block. Take care you position the air motor correctly. It can be fastened tighter, but it has to be placed as before with the marks aligned. Refit the sound absorber. Remove the two small O-rings on the bottom of the air pump. Use plenty of grease and refit new O-rings. When you are ready to refit the complete air hydraulic pump, start by fitting the two screws on the bottom of the flange. Next step is to push the air hose fully into the quick coupling on the air pump. Place the hydraulic unit upright and remove the oil plug. Finally, push the oil hose fully into the quick coupling on the oil reservoir. When you are ready to reassemble the jack, start by unplugging the two hydraulic ports. Refit the complete release valve with the two 8mm screws. Then refit the air valve for the vacuum pump. Mount the release bushing. Make sure that the release valve is firmly closed before remounting the valve knob on the release spindle in the position shown. Install the release knob, giving the return spring a pre-tension of half a turn. When done correctly, the valve will close automatically. Adjusting the valve knob. The valve knob on the release spindle should be positioned pointing straight forward. If not positioned correctly, the lowering speed without load will be slow and/or the valve might not close properly. Adjusting the pressure control valve. If you have tested the jack in a test bench and found the lifting capacity to be too low, you might need to adjust the pressure control valve. Remove the protective cap, loosen the lock nut and adjust the valve. Finally, retighten the lock nut and replace the cap. Always retest the hydraulic unit in a test bench in order to confirm the setting.